Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Comprehension Strategies workshop. My name is Cynthia, an instructor with Iris Reading. Happy to see you in the audience today. We will have someone managing the chat, so if you have any questions, please direct them there. Today, we are going to use a few handouts, and I'll share them on my screen, but if you're having a hard time reading it, here's the link on the screen, so irisreading.com/comp. Okay, so those articles that we'll be using, again, if you're having a hard time maybe reading them off of my screen, might be a better idea to pop them up in a separate tab in your browser. All right, as we mentioned today, we are talking about comprehension. It's not necessarily something that is always automatic, right? We've had a very nice conversation on our Facebook group recently on the subject. The question or the prompt of the day yesterday was, why do you think that most people don't like to read? And the popular response was just not very good comprehension. Okay, and so with that, we were obviously very happy to see that we have a comprehension strategies workshop, right? We don't have one for children yet. This one is for adults. Maybe in the future we'll try to develop something for kiddos. But again, if this is something that you're struggling with, maybe you don't like to read because you're having a hard time processing the information. Again, we don't necessarily talk about how to comprehend in school, just like we don't talk about how to memorize things in school, right? We don't always talk about how to take good notes, and we don't talk about how to be a productive reader. Okay, and that is where Iris Reading kind of fills in the gap, because again, we recognize that a lot of people are kind of just left to their own defenses when reading and learning. And so for those reasons, these workshops were created, they were developed, and we hope that you find them helpful. We'll really quickly reshare that link once again, but we are on social media. Okay, so obviously you all are aware of our YouTube channel. We are on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook. That link is the Facebook group that I was mentioning earlier, and it varies. Maybe one week we'll talk about a book, another week we'll just have a prompt maybe from a newspaper. Right now, this morning, we asked about TikTok and if people believe that this is maybe distracting or mass distracting students today. I know I get distracted once in a while, and I work a full-time job and I go to school, so I can only imagine what happens to a student, right? With TikTok, it can be 2-3 hours just glued to the phone, right? So if you want to maybe check us out, see what else we are doing here at Iris Reading. We post a lot of learning related content, a lot of struggles that students have today, and just you're welcome to check us out there. Also, it's a good place to get a hold of us. So we will share our email, or I'll share my email at the end of the presentation. But if you want to just send us a message or slide into our DMs on Instagram or on TikTok, you are more than welcome to do that. It is synced up to our cellular devices, so we will get the alert immediately. Okay, so let us now talk about comprehension. And we'll touch a little bit on each of the other workshops that we offer, just because we have a fabulous 4-step reading and learning process. So you might have heard of something in the past called the study cycle, right? We have our own version of that, and we call it the Iris method, okay? And so we talk about inspecting and reading in our speed reading workshop. Now, that workshop has been taught in over 100 cities around the world, so we're obviously very proud of that material. And essentially what we're saying, we want everybody, before you read, whether it's a chapter out of a book, whether it's the newspaper, whether it's one of those really long 7-page menus, whatever it is you're going to read, we want you to inspect it before you read it. It'll make a little more sense when you do that. Okay, so we want, and of course that helps us with comprehension, right? After we inspect, that's when we decide if we need to read this or not. as I mentioned, I'm also a student, and over the weekend, my professors will send over just a lot of things, right? A lot of articles, a lot of just research things that they have found. And I found that after inspecting that they really don't need to be read at that moment, or really ever, sometimes at least. Okay, so again, that is touched upon in our, or really discussed in our speed reading workshop. The third step in our IRIS method is inquire. So we want you to ask questions, all the questions, and we'll talk about questions today, but we're talking more so when taking notes. So this is directed towards note taking, which is another workshop of ours, and we want to make sure that you're asking all the questions before class and also during class. Why? Because when we're taking notes and if we're writing things that we don't understand in the moment, it's going to be kind of hard to understand them later. Okay, so preparation, asking all of the questions, making sure we can answer them, and then moving to our final step, which is storing. Again, we don't want you to try to memorize anything if it doesn't make sense to you. A little about myself. I graduated from nursing school a long time ago, and first semester I was trying to memorize things that just made no sense to me at all. Overworked, overwhelmed, and overcaffeinated. That was just the method I chose to pursue, and it didn't work for me. Okay, so if we try to memorize things that we don't understand, it's almost like memorizing something really big, but also really empty. All right, so this is our 4-step process, and we are going to again discuss how comprehension ties into this IRIS method. Now, comprehension is obviously very important, right? We'll usually take an exam to assess our comprehension. We maybe remember these from grade school. So it's important, right? But the problem is that we don't always know how to comprehend the material. We don't know what that means. For some of us, including myself, comprehension was supposed to be something that would happen immediately. You read it and you get it, or you don't. There was no gray space, right? But that's not the case, okay? And this really ties back to being able to ask questions that can lead you to good comprehension. So first thing we'll talk about, being able to explain what you're learning or what you're reading, okay? If we can't explain it, we've got a problem. Second dimension I call to comprehension are the different perspectives on this subject, okay? You'd be surprised after doing a little bit of digging what you find. So we'll talk about that. Your self-knowledge is very important. So are we in tune with ourselves when we're learning? Can you empathize? We want to tap into our emotions a little bit when we're learning. How can this be applied practically, especially for those subjects that you don't enjoy, you don't like, you find rather pointless? We want to find some practical application. And our final point will be, how has this been interpreted by others? And we're talking more so, not language, but more so artistic rendition, or maybe some kind of piece that has been composed on the subject. Okay, so let's first assess your comprehension with the strategies that you came to class with today. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so we are going to read something together. You'll find our link here at irisreading.com/comp again. That's a Dropbox link, by the way. And when you pop it open, you're going to look for the article that is entitled focusrituals.pdf. Okay, so that is what you are looking for. We are going to read for 2 minutes, okay? And I just want to know at the end of the reading, or when you finish reading. Now first, keep in mind you probably won't finish the article, and that's okay. All right, just based on what you read, we'll assess your comprehension that way. All right, so read normally for the next 2 minutes, and then we'll talk about your comprehension, what percentage you would give yourself. Okay, so I will disable my webcam and turn off my mic for the next 2 minutes. You'll notice the timer ticking away in the middle right here, and once the timer runs out, we will be back. All right, here we go, everyone. 3, 2, 1. And we're back. Okay, so we read for 2 minutes. Now, what percentage would you give your comprehension? Would you say that you understood 80% of what was read, 30, 40%? All right. We'll start with that, and hopefully after talking about those different dimensions of comprehension, we'll do this one more time. The exercise will be timed. Again, in the future, keep in mind you don't have to time yourself. Just we want to keep the presentation under an hour for today, okay? So in the future, keep everything, all the strategies that we discuss. You don't have to time yourself. Don't feel like this is something you have to do quickly. It's just, you know, for the sake of time today, we have to use a timer. Okay, so give yourself a percentage, 90, 60, whatever the percentage is of your comprehension. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about a subject that most of us probably know really well, or we think we know really well, and we're going to essentially tear it apart to see if that really is the case, okay? And I actually forgot in the beginning, I'm so sorry, to ask where our audience is joining us from today. So I am so sorry about that. I think I had too much coffee. I was ready to fly this morning before the presentation. Iris Reading is based out of Chicago, and so we have a second office in Miami. We taught these workshops all over the world. This presentation we just launched in March, so we're very happy and excited to see feedback. We have received many, many emails on the subject. We've seen very nice comments as well. So if you'd like to share where you're joining us from, if you've ever heard of Iris Reading in the past, let us know. Let us know again if you've never heard of us, or if you've maybe taken a class earlier this week with us. We'd love to see who we have in the audience. So thank you all. I see we have Miami, Washington, D.C. is here, so that's tremendous. Thank you for participating. And again, I'm so sorry I forgot to ask that. I usually ask it in the beginning, but again, I was just so eager to get into comprehension strategies that I forgot. Okay, so going back to a subject that most of us think we know pretty well, and then it turns out maybe that's not the case. Oh, we have someone joining us from New York. Welcome, happy to see you. Thank you so much. Delhi, hello, nice to see you. Thank you guys for stopping by. Very happy to see that. So gravity. Okay, gravity is a subject that most of us, hey, Janice from New Jersey, welcome. Most of us think that we are pretty familiar. We got a good grip on what gravity is, right? When do we learn this? We probably learned this in like 4th grade. Hello, Norfolk, welcome. Happy to see you. Thank you. But do we really know what it is? Do we really know what gravity is? We're going to tear it apart. Okay, so let us start with, let's see here. We got a lot of people commenting. So happy to see Kathleen from Trinidad. Oh, hello. I'm sure the weather down there is beautiful. Happy to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for participating. So we may be able to explain gravity, right? What goes up needs to come down, right? That's probably something we all are aware of. So we might think, I get gravity. I understand it. I'm good. I comprehend. Okay, well then can you explain how the theory of relativity ties into gravity? Is that something that you can explain to me today? Or can you maybe explain to me how quantum physics ties in to gravity? Hey, Tanya, welcome from North Carolina. Happy to see you. Thank you. Can you maybe explain that? Or even something as simple as how distance maybe ties into gravity. So we've got 3 questions here tying back to a subject that most of us probably think we know rather well, but can we answer them, right? I know in the beginning I couldn't. I was like, I guess I don't know as much about gravity as I thought I did, right? So let us get into the first dimension of comprehension, and that is of being able to explain what you're learning to someone else, okay? Or to the wind, that's fine too, but more so to someone else. And here is why. When you explain something, whether that be to a classmate, a colleague, maybe your teacher, maybe a 6-year-old. You are forced to pretty much put out there what you think you know on the subject, with the hope of your audience asking questions like, why? Why is what you're saying true? Why does the apple fall when you drop it? Right? And just answering, well, that's just how it is. That's not an answer. Okay, that's not an answer. We can't necessarily use that on an exam, right? That reminds me of Feynman's technique or method of taking notes, right? One of the steps in Feynman's method is, I believe, explaining something or writing something down in simple terms, okay? So you want to do that when explaining. You want to explain it in elaborate terms, but you also want to explain it in the simplest terms possible, all right? Because sometimes what happens is that we're able to essentially regurgitate a definition of a word. We can say it word for word exactly as how it is in the book, but does that mean that we can explain, like we understand what it means? Okay, and we don't want that. We don't want you to just mindlessly memorize something, because again, if we can't attach any meaning to it, it's again like memorizing something really big but also really empty. Okay, so asking questions, that reminds me of this Reddit post I came across the other day called "Explain Like I'm 5," right? So pretty extensive, deep, dense topics, right? Similar like what we mentioned, theory of relativity, okay, gravity, interdimensions and all that. Explain it like I'm 5 years old, or explain it to a 5-year-old. Okay, if we can't do that, then probably shouldn't move on, number one, as we mentioned in that Iris method, to memorize it, but we should probably continue to kind of, ruminate on the subject, make sure we're getting it, where everything is making sense to us. So here we go, back to gravity. We know what goes up needs to come down, but why will it roll? Why is this ball rolling down the ramp? Why wouldn't it roll up the ramp? Now, because of gravity, as we said, is not an answer. So we've got all the questions now. Why? And notice we aren't really going to answer any of these questions, but we hope that you research this later, because again, the questions are hopefully leading to pique our interest to do research, to try to figure out these kinds of answers. It's just most of us don't even know what answers we should, what questions, I'm sorry, we should be asking. Okay, so again, we're tearing apart gravity. This is a taste of what is to come. Okay, so if we can't explain it, we got a problem. Okay, we have a problem. So explain it. If you speak another language, can you explain it in that other language? Can you explain it to a parent, right? Can you explain it to a classmate, your teacher? And again, the hope is that they start to poke holes in what you think you know really well by asking simple questions like why, okay? So that is our first dimension. Okay, explain. Now, second are the different perspectives on this subject. Now, this is obviously helpful for maybe law students, right, that have to read through different like case studies and things like that. But how do we, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with gravity, right? Well, did you know that there is an anti-gravity alliance? So this is a group of people that don't believe in gravity. They claim gravity is a lie. Right on their page, they say, first they said the earth was flat. Then they told us F equals ma. Now they tell us E equals m squared. What's next? They have a blog, and if you're like, oh, well, that's just one organization, one group of people. Nope, they have an entire group support system, and an email if you'd like to reach out to them as well. So they have all of these other organizations that back this up, okay? So you're probably thinking, why? Why do these people think this? Well, that's another question. Why? Because again, if you maybe ran into someone from the Anti-Gravity Alliance in the street and they challenge what you think you know, would you be able to defend it? Okay. Not only that, the National Center for Science Education is now saying, or not now saying, but they are stating on their website that gravity is only a theory. So we thought we knew gravity fairly well up until this point. What do you mean it's a theory? So it's not a fact? And let's keep going. There are people that are writing, obviously, their dissertations for PhD on this subject. So gravity is a myth. So we're using the words theory, myth. Now we're getting a little confused here, aren't we? And if this isn't enough, we also have an astrophysicist by the name of Dr. Brian Keating, who says he does not believe in gravity. Now, whether you reason these people might not be 100% there, or whatever it is your reasoning is on the subject, would you be able to defend your knowledge on this subject against someone who claims that is not true? And maybe we're like, uh-oh, oh dear. And we can do this for any subject, okay? We can do this for absolutely any subject. You would be surprised the information you find on these different perspectives. You don't necessarily have to agree, but it's good to at least understand or try to where these people are coming from, okay? Because that will solidify even more what you think you know, or maybe not. Maybe we'll be a little confused at that point, like, I don't know, maybe this isn't really true. All right, but the point again, it's getting you to ask questions. And who would have ever thought that we would question gravity, right? But it's a real thing. Okay, so those different perspectives are another dimension on whatever subject you are trying to learn. Again, really, really important. And I wonder now, we're thinking a little bit more about the subject, right? We're thinking, I guess I didn't know that much, right? And I know that was the case with me when we created this. I was like, oh boy, oh dear. All right, third step is your self-knowledge. And guess what? It actually is all about you, right? You might have heard people say that's not true. Isn't there a song? It's like you probably think the song is about you or something like that. I think that's what the lyrics are. But the point is, when you're learning, it actually is all about you. 100%, right? You're the one that has to take the test. So yes, it is all about you. So we want you to look for function and purpose when learning. Again, whatever it is we're learning. So back to gravity. We had, I know it's been a couple weeks since we've had St. Patrick's Day, but it is a really big deal here in Chicago, right? We have a very big Irish community in Chicago, a lot of grandkids of the Irish folk here in Chicago. And so the big deal, we even turned the river green in Chicago. You might have seen it on the internet, okay? So obviously that means the Chicago party's hard for St. Patrick's Day, which leads me to think that after St. Patrick's Day and after the weekend that people celebrated Monday morning, there were a lot of maybe call-offs. I would imagine a lot of people that were maybe a little dehydrated from having a little too much fun. All right, so how can gravity tie in here? Well, if you had to run to Walgreens to pick up some eye drops before you went into work on Monday after St. Patrick's Day, you didn't have to worry about the drops floating anywhere else but down, right? Because again, we just know that gravity is going to help us out there. So that's very simple, a very simple function with gravity. So we might think about it just like that. That's all we're looking for. Okay, try to find some function and some purpose when you are, again, learning something. Now, I know this was a bit of a silly example, but again, with anything that you're learning, you want to be able to find this function and purpose as well. Okay, tie it back to things you do every day. Okay, how does this affect you? Or maybe not, maybe it wouldn't affect you. Okay, so this is our third dimension, your self-knowledge. Let us move on to the next step, which is empathy. Okay, empathy. Now, who would have thought our emotions would be tied into something like comprehension? We probably didn't think about that before. Well, again, in harmony with our subject of gravity. Who needs empathy when we're talking about gravity? Well, we've got our astronauts, right? NASA, and a shout out to NASA. If you'd like to maybe one day appear as a guest in one of our videos, let us know what it's like to be up in space with no gravity. We'd love to have you here with us. So this is just based on what we were able to dig up on the internet. But how is it that gravity and astronauts, like how does this empathy thing work? Okay, well, let's maybe think about something that we do, or a few things that we do here on Earth that maybe we take for granted, and astronauts don't have the luxury at when they're up in space of benefiting from having gravity. Okay, let's think about something we do maybe a few times a day, like use the bathroom. Okay, now we know, maybe we've seen a few movies like Interstellar or other space-related movies. We know that they're floating around up there. So what does that mean when you go to the bathroom then? It means something is floating out of somewhere, right? And that's not a good thing. Never mind. So imagine being an astronaut and imagine having to go to the bathroom. Then what happens, right? Not something really good. I don't think it's something really pleasant. So what do astronauts then do when up in space, right? And of course, we're talking about using the bathroom, but we'll talk about another thing that we thought of recently. So the Smithsonian actually had an article on the subject. How do astronauts go to the bathroom up in space? A look at the space shuttle's toilet and the deepest, darkest secrets about space flight. Okay. First article, first paragraph said something along the lines, where is it? It says, for solid waste deposits, get a load of this. The toilet has foot straps and thigh braces to help astronauts stay in place, and airtight bags on hand for toilet paper disposal. Astronauts spend a lot of time in training sitting on space toilets to learn how to create a strong seal. Oh my goodness, and how to align themselves properly. And they even have something called a positional trainer. So, can we maybe empathize with astronauts now? Right? When we go to the bathroom here on Earth, we don't have to worry about anything flying out, right? Hopefully. But up in space, things are just floating. Everyone is floating. There's this video I found recently of an astronaut washing her hair up in space, and that like blew my mind. She had a squeezy bottle with a straw, and she would like just kind of squeeze the bottle with the water into her hair, and the water would kind of like float out, so she'd just catch the water and push it into her hair. What other things? Well, something as simple as burping. Here on Earth, we don't have to worry about anything exciting happening after we burp, right? But up in space, guess what? I'm not going to give you the answer. You're going to have to look that one up. But let me just tell you, it's not a good thing when you read it, all right? What I was able to read, it used the words chunky bubbles, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, but again, now with empathy, we're probably like, well, wait, Cynthia, give us the answer. You're gonna have to look that one up for yourself. All right, I had a lot of fun. Obviously, you can tell, researching the subject. And maybe back when I first learned of gravity, I've been like, so what? Who cares? But now, by asking questions, it's piquing our interest. Okay, so that is the purpose again of today's workshop. Let us move on to the next step, which is practical application. Okay, now some questions that you can ask, especially when talking about subjects that we just don't like. And I know I asked this a lot when I was in nursing school. I was like, math cannot be that important when you're in nursing school, but you'd be surprised, okay? So with gravity, how is this applied in the larger world? Well, we know if we're going to throw something somewhere or at somebody, it's just going to come crashing down, right? So some other questions that we can ask on the subject. How and when can we use this knowledge or process? Okay, now obviously it's rather common sense with gravity, so we don't have to dig too deep, but these are some questions that you can ask again when tearing apart a different subject. How is this applied in the larger world, which we've just mentioned, and how could we use this to overcome either an obstacle, a constraint, or a challenge? So again, keep this in mind. Ask all the questions, especially when reading something we don't like, we don't jive with, we don't find practical, we don't find useful. Okay, ask the questions. Again, we want to deepen. If we truly do want to understand something, we have to ask these questions. Okay, so that is practical application. Let's move on to the final dimension, and that is of interpretation. Okay, now you could say, how is this maybe interpreted in another language, right? I know that some things that are in Spanish translated into English, they don't have the same meaning, right? And if you speak another language, maybe Arabic, maybe French, you probably think, yeah, right? It's similar happens, but we're not talking about that. We're talking more so about artistic representation, okay, or an artistic rendition on this subject. And yeah, there are a lot of things that have been inspired by gravity. Specifically, we were very excited to find these gravity-defying statues. Okay, so this is something called The Force of Nature by Lorenzo Quinn. All right, and this doesn't really make sense when you look at it, because again, shouldn't the statue like tip over when we're thinking about gravity, right? That thing is suspended up in air, and if gravity is really affecting us as it does on Earth, that shouldn't stay up. Okay, so thinking about how the artist did this, right? Here's another one, and this is not like something from Chat GTP or anything like that. This is a real statue, okay, at the Fontainebleau in Paris, France. How is this elephant holding himself up? I don't think any amount of glue can keep that thing standing up, right? So what is going on here with gravity? How did this happen? Another one, the floating rocks in Cairo, which I love to see, by the way. How is this holding itself up? The floating boulders, I think it's called. Yeah, no, floating rocks. Again, we just had a whole thing about gravity. How is this doing this, right? So again, it's getting the juices flowing. And here are some wonderful statues, our favorite statues. I got to convince the founder of Iris Reading to let us get one of these in our office in Chicago. I just think this would be so cool. These are called the just book sculptures. I believe is the title, and they're located around Spain, around Madrid, Spain. So again, no amount of glue, I really think, no amount of crazy glue, Gorilla Glue, any glue is gonna keep this upright like this. So these are just some artistic renditions or pieces on gravity-defying, right? Gravity-defying statues. So now we think, okay, well, we just had a whole spiel on gravity. How is any of this actually standing up straight? How is this working? Again, all right, you might think, well, it's just artistic representation, but how did the artist get this to look like that? All right. So again, asking questions. This might take us now to Google to ask, how do the floating rocks in Cairo actually stand up straight? How do the books in Madrid, these book sculptures, how's that happening? What's up with The Force of Nature by Lorenzo Quinn? Why? Okay, or that elephant in Paris, what's up? Okay, so it also reminds me of a piece that was composed by, I believe his name is Gustav Holst. He composed something called The Planets, and it's pretty much just one piece dedicated to each of the planets up in space. Again, not necessarily gravity, but interesting to hear, right? Gravity, the planets, Earth, everything all kind of works together, right? So it was just something I found interesting. It's great music to listen to when you're reading as well. Or maybe reading something that's like alien themed, I would use those pieces as my background music. It's really nice stuff. So let us now talk about these. Let's just do a quick recap of all of the dimensions we broke down for today's comprehension class. Okay, we talked about being able to explain something. Unfortunately, most people stop here. Don't stop here, okay? Don't just explain it to the air. I mean, if you want to practice explaining it, like practice putting your words together, fine. But let's move on to someone in the room, in the class, in the building, anybody, okay, who can, again, poke those holes in what you think you know. Moving on. We talked about the different perspectives. Probably a lot of us had no idea there was an anti-gravity alliance, right? Surprise, surprise. Again, with any subject, why? Why do these people oppose? Okay, we're playing around with another presentation with another thing that most people know fairly well how it works, and that's of batteries. Okay, we know how batteries work, but it was a lot of interesting information on people who do not think we should use batteries. I'm sorry, those words sound too much alike. But there is a lot of people that don't think that batteries should be used, and they find there's a lot of consequences, specifically with working or using rechargeable batteries. So probably never thought about that before, right? Why? Well, stay tuned. We will have that presentation come soon. Self-knowledge, okay? Tap into you, how you think, why you think the way you think, and what this has to do with how you think, okay? Gravity, some things that we do every day, right? We talked about St. Patrick's Day weekend. Maybe some of us had a little too much fun, and how gravity helped us there. Empathy as well. We probably never thought before about how astronauts need to go to the potty up in space, but now maybe we have a little more empathy on the subject, right? And with astronauts as well. We need to tag NASA in this video as well. I'm thinking I'm gonna want an astronaut to give us his take on what that's like. I can only imagine what it's like from down here on Earth, but maybe it's not that bad. Who knows? Okay. How can this be applied practically? Now, gravity is fairly easy to apply, right? It's everywhere, but maybe with other subjects, not so easy, right? Maybe we could never find any practical application in school as to algebra and using algebra in the real world, right? Or geometry in the real world. A couple of years after graduating high school, you might be like, oh, I wish I had paid attention, right? So again, we want to find this practical application, and our final dimension was that of interpretation by others, whether that be artistic representation, music, and maybe we can tie in language as well, because some things are, you've heard, lost in translation, right? So what are the other interpretations, right? I know that there are different interpretations and translations maybe on the Bible, right? And so maybe some people disagree with one version versus another version, but again, comparing or doing a delta check helps us see, okay, what's going on here? Again, and most importantly, we are asking questions. So we want to tie in quickly some inspection strategies. All right, we said in the beginning, we want you to inspect anything you need to read before you read it. Whether we're reading something, a chapter out of a textbook, a report, a journal article. Remember we said, you ever been to one of those restaurants with the super duper long menus? Same thing, inspect. Okay, we look at the intro, headings and subheadings, words in bold and or italics, titles of charts, tables, and diagrams, the conclusion, as well as any questions that may be published in the piece. Okay, and as we said, this is really helpful when preparing for lecture. Note-taking, okay? Note-taking. So if you're feeling like class is like the wild, wild west when you're in, trying to take notes and you just don't know if you should write everything down or nothing, or you have no idea what's happening, inspecting can help with that, okay? Maybe lessen some of those anxieties that we have on taking notes. So now let's tie in everything we've learned, all of the dimensions, okay? And we are also playing around with creating a worksheet. So if that's something that you might be interested in, let us know in the comments. Just like a template you can use while going through different passages, different chapters in a book, like a checklist almost, kind of train you to look at these different dimensions to make sure you have good comprehension when reading for class, okay? So we're gonna try the exercise out one more time. Go back to that irisreading.com/comp link, and you're going to look for the article called flow.pdf, okay? Looks like this. We'll inspect it together. So it says, going with the flow. It says, life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like. By Lao Tzu. Cool. Okay. First subheading, realize that you can't control everything. Bummer. Number 2, become aware. Okay. 3, breathe. 4, get perspective. 5, practice. 6, laugh. And 7, realize that you can't control others. Oh boy. Okay, and in case anyone's wondering, these passages that we picked out for today were taken from a book called Focus, A Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction by Leo Babauta. I can send that to you, by the way. The author has allowed us to share his book. So if you want it, I will give you my email at the end. So first, we are going to finish reading the article. We have inspected it. Now we're going to finish reading it. Let's see if the inspection helps us with comprehension, and also think about some of those things that we talked about today, all of the different dimensions. The timer will run up to 2 minutes, and afterwards, maybe think a little bit about those different dimensions again and see if it helps you deepen that comprehension on this article, which again is called Going with the Flow. So here we go. We are going to read this article. You'll notice the timer ticking away, and when it finishes, I will be back. Here we go, everyone. Start. And there we go. So we finished reading the article. Again, maybe we're now processing everything, thinking about empathizing with the author, right, on this subject, thinking about what maybe some opposing views may be on the subject. Can we explain it to someone maybe after class today, right? Are there any artistic renditions on the subject of going with the flow, right? Just a few questions we want to make sure we are asking to deepen our comprehension, okay? So very good. And now give yourself a percentage, give yourself a score. What would you say your comprehension score is this time? Now, I know we didn't give you that much time to think about it, but in the future, hopefully we are seeing, feeling a little more confident about what we're reading for one, and getting a higher score with that comprehension. Now, we know we have these like standardized exams here in the US where you have to read and you have to understand the information really quickly. Like, for example, studying for the LSAT, one of the logic games, I believe, you're given like 35 minutes to read through 4 different passages and answer 6 questions per each passage. So your comprehension strategies need to be like lit when you're taking those exams, right? So obviously we want to get faster and faster at doing this, but this might be the first time a lot of us are even thinking about comprehension, how to deepen it, how to better it, right? So again, it'll take a little bit of practice, and I hope again that you all reach out if you need any support. I'm sorry. If you made an improvement, you obviously get the success, baby. And even if you didn't make improvement, that's okay. It takes practice. All right, it takes practice, and we talk about practice in our speed reading workshop, by the way. Inspecting is essentially getting the gist of what is happening with this article, the structure of the article, before we nosedive into the material. Okay, growing up on the island of Puerto Rico, I'm not sure if anyone has ever been. I am from the non-touristical side, the jungle pretty much, where we have a lot of rivers, a lot of streams. It's very hot, right? But as kids, we made sure that we would inspect before we jumped into any puddle of water, because there was a lot of wildlife in Puerto Rico, a lot of things that will electrocute you, bite you, zap you. And so you got to inspect, right? Make sure it's safe, make sure everything is okay. So same thing with reading. We got to make sure we're ready to go when reading. What are we working with before we start to read? The iris method, again, please don't forget it. Don't forget us, but also don't forget that iris method. So we said inspecting before you read, deciding to read or to not read, asking all the questions, right? No question is a bad question. And then moving on to the final step, which is storing. If you want a copy of that article, or the book, I'm sorry, that we referenced in the beginning, the 2 different articles that we used came out of this book by Leo Babauta, Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. Send me an email at cynthia@irisreading.com and I can get that to you. Again, thanks for attending. Want to quickly share, we have more live streams coming out this afternoon. So if you want to stop by, please do. And of course, we would appreciate if you subscribed to the channel. Don't forget to check us out on social media. Send any questions that you have our way or leave them in the comment section below and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Have a good rest of your day, everyone, and hope to see you in a future session. Bye.